Okay, so we're back. We just had a minor technical spasm. Um, so we'll just pick up where we left off. Ariela was taking us through her journey with her relationship to education, and we'd gotten through her intense childhood and all the way to her educational project, her first educational program that she'd built in Israel. And and in the end you talked about the informal education, right? You were doing.
Yeah.
So let's pick up
Yeah,
from there.
yeah. I was talking about this difference, right? Where they put the children and they just give them one kind of, yeah, to absorb education through just one language or one way, right? Which is very frontal through the ear and through seeing and writing, right? Reading, writing, and there's much more senses that you can get involved in education, and that's what will build the areas of the brain of the kids and the neural connections. The more senses they use in education, the more they will absorb and the more their memory will work with that, right? So I think there's a lot of potential getting wasted in the normal educational system, a huge one, right, in the development of a human being, right? So yeah, I mean, school is the most important thing, should be the most important thing, right? It's like literally you're grabbing the children in the more important stages of their life. And you have two chances. Either you build a human being and you help them develop in the best way possible, in which they can absorb a lot and develop their brain, or you do what we've been doing all this time, which is literally turning them off and making them become work ants, which is really sad, I think. And well, after Israel, I did a master's in community development. And I remember this one teacher that she was a global economics teacher, incredible one, but really with a mindset of economics. And so she came to us and we had to write a paper about education. So she was like, the reason that education exists is to institutionalize children so they can get into the institutions later. And that was shocking for me. I was like, what? You're reducing education to institutionalization, and that's absolutely insane. So I write a paper like trying to prove exactly the contrary, actually based on Sudatas Mitra's
It's the same theory.
yeah, theory. And I was amazed by it. Really, really great. It was really funny because when Oscar told me he was like his guide for his thesis, I was like, what? Wow. I learned about this guy and I was like so amazed by him and his model. And then, yeah, that was really cool. So in this master's, I learned a lot about how to do community development. And as a part of that, I did an internship in the Amazon in Ecuador. And I work with Amwae, which is a Waorani women organization. This community is a community that was colonized on the 60s. So before that, they used to live the old ways. And in the 60s, they came and colonized them, and everything changed. So kids went through what a little bit that you were talking about, from this community way of education to the normal system, right? And so one of the projects that we were doing there is so we did some projects with violence education and also sustainability and how to take care of their land education. But one of the most beautiful projects that was going on there, it was that this school that was for the elders, right? So we built a typical home, like the ones they used to live in before. And it created this space where the elders could teach the children. So twice a week, the children would go there and and learn from the elders of their communities and learn about the tradition of their elders, which was very, very beautiful, I think. And then that's it. After Ecuador, I went back to Israel for a while to get graduated. And then I moved to Mexico and I met Oscar and I started to, I just heard the proposal of the protocol and I knew I was going to get there. I remember the first time I told you, like, are you sure what you're getting into? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I want to give my life to this, bro. Like, let's do it, right? And I mean, I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but it was one of the best decisions of my life. And I think, this is a beautiful project that we will get more into in a bit.
Right. Okay, so that's it for the personal journeys. As you can see, we have here two people with very strong experiences with education, both as subjects of education and also as leaders. There's a lot of passion involved and a lot of models that are being that have already been developed and implemented and experimented with. So we have here two people with a lot of experience with how else you can do education. But I think the anchor of this conversation is really going to be the modern educational system, the mainstream educational system as it exists today, because you can have a million different alternative ways of education, but the way that we're going to make sense of it in this conversation is in relationship to whatever situation we have going on now. And indeed, we do have. You might ask yourself, can we even talk about having a single global educational system? I mean, that's a fair question to ask, because at the end of the day, it's also, we don't have a global government per se. We have a lot of different countries that are collaborating with each other. Okay, there's a disagreement here. You might have a de facto.
We'll get to that in another episode.
We don't have an official. I'm sorry, we don't have an official government. Okay. I'll take responsibility for this later in the episode. I promise.
We're gonna go there. It's inevitable to go there because yes, we're all, as we were talking. I mean, sorry for interrupting, because it has to do with this perspective and what we're gonna do about it. Like, honestly, like we, as I was saying in the beginning of this episode, is that we, as educational system, we are based in a worldwide perspective.
Absolutely.
No, it's inevitable to know that, to assimilate that. We're in a world order. I'm not being a conspiracist. Not just being a conspiracist.
I agree with
I'm
that.
being a realist.
Yeah.
So then, educational systems around the world are under an umbrella of guidance,
Yes.
of lines of perspectives, and this is how worldwide educators, teachers, governments, they gather around in committees worldwide,
Yeah.
politicians, to discuss the destiny of child in numbers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? So in Mexico and many other parts of the world, let's ask our governors, or you can go into internet and check out how much budget do the government has to the for the educational system, and then you will see the priorities of the government.
Absolutely. No.
And if you do an analysis, the last time I checked, maybe I'm wrong, but not more than 20% of the government's budget in any part of the world. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but at least in most part of the world, go to the budget of the national expenditures, not more than 20% goes to education. So that's not a priority for the government. And even though it's not a priority, like it also, it's badly executed.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going. Like, even if they invested a lot, what's their objectives? Because if they will invest all their money in education, but their objective is to institutionalize children, then we don't want that much budget in education, right? I don't know. But
And many of those budgets are going to not to educate, it's to evaluate.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves now. This is what we're going into. That's true. I want to correct the interpreted meaning of what I said. I was actually trying to strengthen the point that there is a global world order and there is a global world de facto governance of education and a global agenda and a global system to enforce that agenda, despite the fact that we don't have a global government. The reason I mentioned it is because I think some listeners might hear talk of a global educational, agenda and stuff like that, and think maybe that's a bit of an extrapolation. But the truth of the matter is that you have some major governing bodies. One of them is the OECD. You have the World Bank, that's been a major player, that's been really steering the path of education through funding, through money. Right, and the OECD, they use a different instrument to kind of play the system. They use epistemic technology, so they tell you what's the goal and they tell you how to measure the goal. And they have probably the most famous international large-scale assessment, the PISA test, right? But then you also have the European Union, and you have UNESCO, and some other very big organizations that are. So in a sense, it's not a centralized government. At some level, these are bodies. They're also competing a little bit against each other for control over the global agenda. But there is a global agenda, and so that means we have a basis to talk about global education and what might be wrong with it. It's a thing. It's a real thing with documents behind it and enforcement behind it. And that's where the conversation is going to go now. Basically, we've had a lot of reasons from what you already shared now to think that there is something fundamentally wrong with the educational system, and now is the time to try to understand kind of rationally where that comes from and how we can understand the deficits and the causes of the deficits, so that we can have a more fruitful conversation afterwards about the remedies and ultimately about how Central Q plans to execute a remedy. And the first question I'd like to start with on this part is like not thinking about the specific educational system we have today, but in general, on the abstract, what does it mean for you to say that an educational system is failing? And further, what does it mean to say that it's broken? Right? What does that actually mean?
Interesting. That's thanks. I love that question. Before that, I'm gonna cite Sugata Mitra again because I mean, thanks, Sugata, for everything. He says in his TED Talk, it's not broken, it's it's not outdated, it's wonderfully constructed. It's incredibly constructed. Can he call it the bureaucratic administrative society in the school system? The problem is that it's not yet broken, because we would need to fix it, and people are not acknowledging that we need to change it. How we can see it, at least in my perspective, well, if education back in the 60s or 70s were more efficient, right now we wouldn't have so many wars going on right now. We wouldn't have so many violence in the world. Because as Ariela was saying, many people take the education and schools as institutionalization of the development process, and other, as Foucault was saying, the panoptics of society, the devices of the continuum and permanent pattern of self-destruction. If I, yeah, it's a pattern of self-destruction because people over 50s or 60s that are right now in power positions are choosing war over peace because it's not anymore just I know, and it's not just the biggest war in in the world. It's not just Ukraine with Russia or Israel with Iran and with Gaza, or Mexico with It's not just that, or Africa. It's filled with war. It's not just that. It's how we relate to each other day to day. How many wars do you have with one another? How many? How are you efficient? And not just efficient, because efficiency usually is means for many people that it's structure and logic. But how can we solve conflicts in a more loving way with one another in the day by day? It's just like that. I always say, if you end the war within you, the war outside's gonna be over. If we all heal the war within us, we're not gonna need to fight outside. The problem is that many people that's over 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, their value systems are still focused on, I don't know. Yeah, man. I don't want to sound as a socialist or communist or whatever, but right now we're living in a world that the capitalism is the main structure, social structure in the world. It's inevitable to be conscious about it. We all know that. We haven't seen any other structure so far in a long-term process. The other day I was saying that the longest civilizations that ruled or had more power over the world were Egyptians, and they lasted more than, in different periods of times, more than 300 years in one period, then another 100 years, and another 100 years in another period, right? So the power of civilizations since the beginning of times, whichever you consider are the beginning of times, has been changing. And we haven't seen, I don't remember listening, at least one day in the world without a violent crime in the history of humanity. One day in the history of humanity without a violent crime. I haven't heard of that. I'm not gonna be involved right now into Rousseau, or philosophical perspectives, but it like overwhelms me to think that we haven't had one day of peace in the whole history of known history of humanity, or at least mainstream known history of humanity. So
as a whole,
humanity, yeah. I dare people to, or not dare, but I would ask people to tell me how have we not fight? When? Maybe the Nephilims or the Lemurians, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, most of us have been pockets of civilization, right, where there's been temporary peace.
I don't know when.
I mean,
There's
I'm
no
not sure, but I'm
not
thinking
one
place like Tibet or some
When?
communities.
No, there are monks that were specifically trained to kill and protect.
In
Tibet.
Okay.
Yes, in many parts of the areas of Buddhism, actually the monks of Buddhism, and they have extreme martial arts abilities, like impressive martial arts abilities.
Right.
Impressive.
Right.
And maybe there are stories. I have there are stories that they were peaceful and they knew all this amazing martial arts and powers because ki, it's not just a fairy tale. Those guys have mastered the power of the chi and the ki. They have mastered the power of their own body and their own energy. They can do amazing stuff that we as normal, real human beings we can even dream of. So yeah, I mean, educational system have gotten us into these belief systems that are preventing us to achieve our fullest potentials in many ways.
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk about the diseases of the world, the crisis of the world, let's say violence or war, as one potentially interpreted as one big symptomology of the educational system, right? That if you see a pathology in society, then at some level that's going to have roots in educational system, or at the very least that could have been to some extent prevented through a different education. So that's one way you can look at indicators that there is something wrong. So insofar as you have great global crises that are facing humanity today, you can infer back the causality to at least a large extent to the educational system, whether you're talking about a climate crisis or a mental health crisis or a meaning crisis that we're talking about, and many other intersecting crises that have been called by different names, including the meta crisis. That can be read as symptomology. So that's one place to start. Is to say we clearly have a problem. Now, from there, what's the problem? And how do different problems in the educational system link up with these symptomologies? I mean, you already alluded to the fact that if we have an inner war going on, that is linked to conflicts and greater level conflicts that we call wars in society. But I guess, yeah, maybe before we go into like more specific diagnosis, maybe you want to also say your thoughts about what does it mean that an educational system is failing?
Yeah. So failing, I think it's a better word than broken, because I agree with him. It's not broken. It's very, very stable, and that's a problem. I think one of the main things in which we're failing at is that we are understanding the purpose of school. So schools work as a training ground for kids to survive in the economic world we have today, right? So it's a training ground for kids to be ready to work in a company, to develop some product. So basically, it's we're putting children to get the knowledge, the basic knowledge that someone needs to go out and go to a university, right? So then they can be someone in this world and how it works. Right. And I think we've been seeing it wrong all this time. I think schools shouldn't be a training ground for surviving in society. It should be a training ground to becoming the best version of yourself and to develop as a human being. And that's the thing, because they shape each other, right? So right now the model, the way the system works is modeling school. But I think that if we model school in a way that models human being into be better persons, into be connected with themselves, with their emotions, with their environment, with others, to care, to find meaning, then that will shape society in a completely different way. And I think that the big people in power don't want this, honestly. Like, right. I do think schools and all the money and all the budget that governments are putting into the educational system is to keep their agenda going. So most educational programs that we have today that are like the most prized ones, like the IVs and all of these programs that are making education more global. So actually, these programs now are getting implemented in schools all over the world, and it's the same program, right? And they're trying to innovate. I'm not gonna take that off them. Like schools had changed since I was in school, and they're trying to innovate, and they're doing better in what I hear from the programs right now in school. But still, they still training humans to be able to function in a completely dysfunctional society. So what I hear of the students of high school today, so they are literally getting extra ultra busy and stressed, and they're so stressed about school that they're starting to have physical problems. So that why do you have one genius that cannot function because his stomach is bad, or because they're in a completely stressed, well, they function, right? In a factory, that's how humans work. They work well under stress. So that's the thing. It's like we're keeping this. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone specifically. I think this is a way that things went through, and we just never stopped and see how fucked up this is, right? And we never looked back and see what the actual fuck are we doing to children. Really, like for me, it sounds to slavery / child abuse to have them like this. And I know that sounds extreme, but I really think that saying to a kid, you cannot move from the chair, or you just can go to the bathroom in the recess, which you have 15 minutes to do, obviously you will want to stay talking with their children, and then they go back to the classroom and they can't even go to the bathroom. I mean, how much can you learn there? And also, what is learning? Because I don't think, just being able to swallow a shit ton of information and then vomit it in an exam, it's learning anything, right? So I think we have all the concepts wrong here. Education is wrong understood. Learning is wrong understood. I mean, you get a better grade if you are the best one memorizing and vomiting. This does not tell me anything about you as a human being. Right. Literally anything.
Can I ask? Yeah. So you're saying that we're failing, but this is not a broken educational system. But you're describing a situation of a mass torture of children.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because what's the objective there? It's not broken for what the governors want. If they want to have a very productive country, which makes a lot of money, they're doing a great job. They need to break the people, because the people and humans, and when you really get into connecting with yourself and connecting with your soul and connecting with others and connecting with your environment, you won't give a shit about making shit ton of money for your country, right? That won't be your main objective. That won't be your main motivation. So I don't think actually the interest of the global agenda is to have connected and healthy human beings. And I'm not saying if this is conscious or unconscious, it's just not what is best for the country or the economy or of the world, which seems to be the main interest of most governments.
So my question is, what would we have to see? So you're saying, what I'm hearing you saying is that the world is still functioning, therefore you can't say that the educational system is broken. It's not leading to societal collapse yet, right? So how, first of all, do you see this, if we continue the status quo, do you see this leading to a breakdown situation, even though it isn't yet?
I mean, we're there.
But you said that society is still functioning.
It's functioning for growing the economy, right?
Right.
Not for anything else. It's working for growing the economy, which seems to be the objective of most global agendas and countries. It's not working for life, for sure. It's a mass suicide. We're killing Earth, bro. We're like literally the only species that fucks our planet up, and then it's a mass suicide. That and wars, like Oscar was saying before. Come on, like we're definitely on a broken society. We have a huge mental health crisis. We're fighting everyone out. We're literally killing the only fucking planet that we could live in because of money. So I think if the objective is money for most governments, then their educational system works great for that. Not for life or for humans or for anything that has, another thing that has not to do with economical growth.
Okay. So you're saying that in every aspect we are seeing a breakdown of education, except for the aspect that informs education, which is economic growth, right? We're living under a paradigm of the human capital philosophy of education, which is to view human beings as means for profit. So you're putting in an investment from government spending in every kid, and you want then that to be a green number at the end of their life, basically, right? As big of a green number as you can. Um. So I mean, so that it
Yes, we might have lost a lot of audio. So yeah, I think we might have to leave it here.
Yeah, can I just add something really, really quickly?
So,
Yeah, just to close that, to close up, and I think you mentioned very important things. I think the teachers are literally crucial. Um, of all the like new approaches you mentioned, I think there's a really interesting one that it's called democratic schools, that it's all about giving power to the children. And I think one of the main problems it's also that we think that children can't, or they're too small, or always they're just children. Broad children are geniuses. We need to remember that. And once you and give them the agency of their own knowledge, which is what Sudhata Mitra talks about a lot. And I think that is one of the most important things we need to change, is just our perspective of children and value them as very valuable human being. And it's not just a children. Broad children are the future of the world. Being just a children is one of the most important things you can be. So I think we really need to focus on that, and yeah, give power to the children. That's what I wanted to say.
Right. So at this point, we've gotten well into the beyond the question of what it means in general that education is failing, to what specifically is wrong with the modern educational system, and further on to solutions. So we've been a bit across the board, and yeah, there's going to be much more. Um, yeah, no, I guess I want to just pinpoint some of the things that that came up. It seems like a lot of the pathologies that we've talked about so far have to do with a lacking inner education, whether that be your habits of how you communicate with yourself, um, and or any other kind, or socializing with each other. So personal or interpersonal education is something that's not being emphasized. We've talked about the problem of just the conditioning, the effects of the conditioning children through yeah, through competitive ranking against each other, and how that conditions this kind of relationship that kids go on to have with themselves in their adult life. Um, and yeah, then we've discussed many models of education that can be implemented, and I think we have a lot more to collect together around this and explore in future episodes. So yeah, for now we can leave it at that. Until next time.
thank you.
Thank you.